Chapter 27. When Billy hung up the phone, he turned to look at Daniel. "What was that about?" Daniel asked, seeing the blank look on Billy's face. "These guys are going on a picnic and they want 2 pizzas delivered at the Bill Butler Park's entrance in a half an hour." "What kind of pizzas do they want?" "A pepperoni and a Hawaiian," Billy said, still looking nonplussed. "What's the matter? Didn't they give their credit card or something?" "No, son, that's not it. But it's now near 8 o'clock and I don't like having to meet 2 guys in the dark at the entrance of a park." Billy shook his head. "I don't like it." "Why don't we go together then?" Daniel suggested. "We don't have to get out of the truck. We just wait until they show up." "I don't know. I don't feel good about this, Daniel. Besides, the Bill Butler Park is no place to have a picnic in the middle of the night." He shook his head again, as if trying to erase the foreboding thoughts out of his mind. "Anyway, let's get them done and we'll go together as you said." "What about phoning them back to be sure they're who they say they are?" "Yeah, maybe I'll do that when we take them out of the oven so they know we're coming." 20 minutes later, the 2 pizzas were out and already in the boxes when Billy called the number the man had given him. They talked for a minute or so, and when Daniel heard Billy chuckle, he felt a little better. "Okay, let's go then," the big man said to Daniel, grabbing the 2 boxes off the counter. "We'll close the shop for an hour, but leave the lights on, okay?" "Sure, let's get this done," Daniel said, already out the door and climbing in the passenger side of Billy's pickup. On their way there, Daniel was lost in thought. He remembered that his mum had described his dad falling in the clearing of a park. Maybe he fell in this park, he wondered. As soon as they arrived at the park's entrance, they saw an elderly man dressed in a white suit and supporting his weight on a cane. "Is that the guy you talked to?" Daniel asked, nodding in the man's direction. "I guess so," Billy answered, smiling. "He doesn't look very menacing, does he?" "No, but you said there were 2 guys waiting for us. Where's the other one?" "No idea, Daniel," Billy replied, pulling by the curb and stopping beside the elderly fellow. Rolling his window down, Daniel looked at the man curiously. His gentle face definitely held no malice. "Hi," Daniel said. "Are you the person who ordered the pizzas?" "Yes, Daniel, I am." Stunned, Daniel stared at the gentle fellow. "How do you know my name? Have we met before?"
"Yes, Daniel, I am." "No, we haven't, son, but your father and I are well acquainted."
"You know my dad? How can that be? Who are you?" By this time, Billy, who had not come out of the pickup, leaned over the steering wheel to look at the person standing beside Daniel's window.
"The name is Nicholas, Daniel. I am the one who found your dad in this park many years ago. And I just wanted to give you both," he looked at Billy, "a message."
"A message?" Daniel queried. "What sort of message? From whom?"
"Let's say it's from the person in charge of this operation. You are to wait for your family here in Key West. Do not return to Davy. You and your dad, as well as your mother and siblings, need to go back to Pahokee together from the clearing in this park in order for you to return to 2014. Do you understand?"
Yes, Daniel said, nodding. "But I thought we were supposed to go back to the clearing where Mum, Stefano and I landed. Why the one here in Key West?"
"I have only been told that since your family and yourself to a point followed your father's progress to the future, you should all be together in Key West in this clearing."
Nicholas shot a quick glance over his shoulder at the park's gate.
"And not the one in Pennsylvania. More than that I couldn't tell you."
"But what about Billy here?" Daniel turned his face to the big guy. "When am I going to see him after I've gone back?"
"I am sure God will see to it that you 2 meet again in the future."
Nicholas paused and smiled. "And now I must leave you. What about the pizzas, sir? What about the 2 guys who have ordered them?"
"Oh, that was a little trick of mine to get you, Daniel, to accompany Billy on this errand. As for the pizzas, why don't you have them for dinner, eh?"
Nicholas chuckled as he turned on his heels and left to pass through the park's gates. Daniel turned to Billy. "Doesn't that beat all? My whole family will be coming here to pick me up. I just can't believe it." Billy turned on the ignition and smiled. "Well, let's look at it this way, son. At least you don't have to save for a bus fare and you won't have to look forward to a long bus ride either." Destiny seemed to offer the little family a haven from troublesome thoughts and worries. They had woken up that morning after a good night's sleep. Free from concerns, it was as if they were on holiday once again. When they came up on deck to see what Damianos was up to, they found their cat checking the weather instrument panel. "What's happening, Damianos?" Stefano asked, bending over to look at the weather map on the little screen.
"I just wanted to make sure that we would not be encountering any nasty storm or fog in our travels,"
Damianos answered distractedly. "Did you say our travels?" Malou inquired from over Stefano's shoulder. "Where are we going?"
"There's a slight change of plan, milady. It seems that we have to travel back to Key West to meet Daniel."
"But I thought we were going to find him in Davy," Gabby piped up. "Did you get some new instruction, or did something happen to Daniel?"
No, my dear, nothing happened to Daniel. He's fine, but the whole family should return to Pahokee first before you go back together to Davy."
Somehow I thought it would be the case, Malou said. In order for us to return to 2014, we have to get back to the clearing where Dan landed, and only then could we travel to our present. She nodded.
Yes, Malou, that's correct, Damianos added. Normally you would have to go to the clearing where you and the children landed, near the old house in Pennsylvania, but in this case, and as I understand it, since you have been following your husband since 1988, it has been decided that you should be together in Key West to return to Pahokee.
After a moment of silence, Stefano said decisively, All right then, what do you want us to do?
Let's just make sure we've got nothing on the top deck that could slide off. The sea might be a bit choppy, especially this morning, but I think once we reach the Keys it should be smooth sailing.
How far is it from here? How long is it going to take us to get there? Gabby asked.
It's about 130 nautical miles, and we should be able to get there later this afternoon.
Damianos looked at each of them in turn.
Are you okay? Is there something wrong? He asked Malou.
No, Damianos, everything is fine. But I guess we feel as if we're nearing the end of a strange journey. I mean at least me. I feel as if I'll never be able to take another trip like this one. You mean you'd like to go on with this? Gabby asked, slightly surprised. Of course not, child. I'm glad it will end soon, but it's been too fantastic for words.
As I told you once before, Malou, Solangi and Damien will always be watching over you, and as far as me, you know where to find me.
Damianos laughed heartily. You mean you'll return to your windowsill in Pahokee?
Oh yes, Gabby, that's my home. That's where I stand on guard, and from where Chippewa, your dream maker, can guide people through their dreams and their past.
It all seems to be so long ago since we've seen the old seminole and little church. I'd like to go back and send a prayer to heaven from there, Malou remarked musingly.
Maybe you shall, my dear, maybe you shall.
When Dan closed his book, he threw a glance at Chippewa. And what happens now? Where are we going? Chippewa didn't answer, but looked at Damien. Well, as you know, Dan, in order for you to return to Pahokee together with your family, you will need to go back to the clearing where you fell into your past, Damien said, fixing his gaze on Dan. You mean we have to go back to Key West?
Yes, Dan, Solangi said. In the first instance, we thought it would be a simple matter for you and your family to rejoin Daniel in Davie, where he would be waiting for you in 2007. However, it cannot happen that way. To maintain the order in which the events in one's life occur, you need to travel back to Pahokee from the clearing where you landed in the first place.
And will Daniel be there? Dan asked.
Oh yes, he has been informed of the change of plans, and he'll be there when you arrive in 2007.
What about my wife and my son and daughter? Do they know what to do now? Yes, Dan. Damianos is taking them back to Key West as we speak, Damien said. Dan seemed pensive for a minute. There's something I don't understand, though, he said, addressing his query to Damien. I can't see my having to go back to clearing in Key West, but as far as my family, didn't they land somewhere else? And shouldn't they return to that place instead of Key West? I'm glad you asked, Dan, Damien replied. In fact, this is the case for almost everyone who travels to their past, yes. However, when it comes to you and your family, the order from on high is to have your entire family assembled in one spot before you can all return to Pahokee. So the Bill Butler Park in Key West is the place from which you will return to 2014 together. Thanks for clarifying that, Dan said, smiling at the angel. I'm sorry, Gustavo interrupted all of a sudden, but if I understand you correctly, one has to have landed in a clearing in order to return to their present, right?
Yes, Gustavo, that's right,
Chippewa said.
But your case is a little different. You have accepted to accompany Dan all the way to his future, and although you have not landed in a clearing and you have not come from Pahokee, you only need to hold on to Dan's hand to transverse the 7 years separating you and Dan's family from their present.
Sounds good to me, Gustavo said, nodding and reclining to the back of his chair. And what happens after I get to 2014? He looked at Dan. Where will I live? Will I have a job? How about learning to drive a Hummer limousine? Dan asked his friend, a grin appearing across his lips. Do you really have to ask? Gustavo replied, laughing. It goes without saying, mate. After learning to drive a semi in 1988, driving one of these strange cars should be a breeze, no? Not exactly a breeze, but I'm sure you'll get the hang of it soon enough. Very well then, Damien concluded. All we have to do now is bring you back to Fort Lauderdale. But I thought you said we've got to go to Key West. Yes, Dan, that's what we said, yet you and Gustavo have not completed your journey in time, have you?
Not quite, Chippewa replied, but we'll soon reach 2007, and then we'll go and join your family, Dan.
Grabbing his book from the table, Dan turned around to look at the Jesson Key Mountains behind him one last time. I think I'll come back with my family, he said reflectively. I want all of them to appreciate the beauty of this place and the meaning of it, same as I do. He got up. Should we go then? Damien nodded, and snapping his fingers, he brought Chippewa, Gustavo and Dan back to the restaurant they had left only half an hour ago. Wow, that was something else, Gustavo exclaimed. Travelling back in time like that, so far back it's something I'm not likely to forget. He turned to Chippewa. Do you think I could revisit some of my parents' past if I go to that place in Pahokee?
Perhaps, Gustavo, as long as you do not want to go back to a year after 1988, it should be okay,
Chippewa told him. Well, why would you want to do that? Dan asked him, putting his book down on the table. Well, for one, as I understand it, there's a book like yours for everyone who travels to their past in that old house, and I'd like to see what mine says. And there's my mum and my dad. It would be great to see them again.
Yes,
Chippewa said.
But you need to realize that when you go back to your past, you'll relive the good as well as the bad. If you had a bad experience, as Dan can tell you, you will not be able to escape from reliving it. You can't separate good from bad. Your life is made of a balance of events. Nothing good happens without bad lurking before or ahead of everything.
Well, that's the way you appreciate the good things in life. You only want the sun to shine when you see the snow, or you want to laugh only when you're sad, and you want someone to love when you feel lonely, right? Dan shook his head and smiled. We'll make a philosopher out of you yet, he remarked. Yeah, maybe, Gustavo said, getting to his feet. How about I get a fresh pot of tea for everyone? What do you say? Both Dan and Chippewa laughed out loud and nodded.